I've probably watched The Walking Dead more times than I can count, but every time I go back, especially to those early seasons, I see something new. A story about a man who starts off in a hospital bed and ends up leading what's left of the world. A man who'd do anything, lie, kill, suffer, to protect his family, his people, and his own humanity. Recently, I rewatched season 4, and it hit me how much of what we see on screen is true to the comic. What parts were changed, what parts were expanded or removed entirely. I'll admit, for the longest time, I didn't even know this show was based on a comic series, and I'm sure some of you watching might be in that same spot. At first, I was just like most fans, obsessed with the zombie action. But somewhere along the way, I realized that The Walking Dead was never really about the walkers. It was about the people, about Rick, his choices, his evolution, his darkness. And from a writing perspective, that hooked me even more. I love to write and come up with interesting settings and characters to come up with my own plots and stories. Whenever I watch a movie, a TV show, or even read a book, I like to think about techniques that I could use in my own creations. So, back to The Walking Dead, I started reading the comics. And when I mean reading them, I got through the first 3 volumes. But I really started paying attention to the storytelling, the character arcs, the differences in structure, pacing, and even dialogue. And let me tell you, the Rick Grimes in the comics, he's not the exact same man we follow in the show. And that's all right. Because as Robert Kirkman himself once said, this book is more about watching Rick survive than it is about watching zombies pop around the corner and scare you. And that's what this video is all about. It won't be about the differences between the show and the comics, but more about the differences between these 2 versions of Rick. These 2 versions of how Rick ultimately survives. So, we're following Rick Grimes' story, season by season, volume by volume, comparing the major arcs from both the show and the comics. And along the way, we'll break down what makes Rick such a compelling, unforgettable character, not just to fans, but to storytellers like you and me. If you like the video, then please like and leave a comment on who your favorite character is from The Walking Dead. And, this should go without saying, but from here on, expect spoilers from both the TV show and the comics as we parallel Rick's journey. The show has been out for a long time now. If you haven't watched it yet, please go do that. Anyways, let's get started. Rick Grimes begins as an ordinary hero, a deputy sheriff from King County, Georgia. In the TV series premiere, Days Gone By, Rick is wounded in the line of duty and falls into a coma. He awakens in an abandoned hospital to a nightmare. The dead have risen and civilization has crumbled. Disoriented and still wearing that hospital gown, Rick embarks on a quest to find his wife Lori and young son Carl. He navigates the dark and creepy hospital where he begins to piece parts of this broken world into his head. He comes across the iconic "Don't Dead, Open Inside" door before stumbling down a dark staircase and making his way outside into the world. He makes a trip back to his family home, where soon he meets fellow survivor Morgan Jones. Already here, these early moments establish Rick's core traits. He's courageous, morally upstanding, and determined to find and protect his family at all costs. In the comic book, issue number 1, also titled Days Gone By, the story unfolds similarly. Comic Rick wakes in an empty hospital and returns home to find his family missing. This time, Rick is already in his police uniform, as it was in the nightstand next to his hospital bed. In the comic, Rick actually encounters the dead before making it out of the hospital, wrestling them down that dark and dingy staircase before finally managing to tie it off with his belt, trapping them inside. I'm sure the show wanted to build this slow burn, where they didn't fully want to reveal the walkers quite yet out of the gates, and rather chose to go for a more subtle approach, with the corpses that were littered just outside the hospital. The show writers probably wanted to give this feeling of uneasiness, whereas the comic throws it right into your face. Comic Rick then meets Morgan Jones, who explains the apocalypse, similar to that of the show. Rick's iconic sheriff's hat and uniform immediately mark him as a symbol of law and order amid the chaos. From the start, both Ricks carry a strong moral compass. They still believe in the rule of law and doing what's right. In both mediums, Rick travels to the city and gets ambushed by a herd of walkers. TV Rick gets stuck in a tank until he is rescued by Glenn, whereas Comic Rick finds Glenn on the streets, who helps lead him away from the undead city. In the show, this whole part is stretched out, but for a good reason, to build tension and develop Rick's character. I won't go into too much detail, other than the show has the rooftop scene with Merle Dixon, a TV-exclusive character, and their escape from the city using walker guts. In the comics, Glenn just simply leads Rick to his group, who had set up camp just on the outskirts of the city, waiting for help to arrive. But this is where the 2 Ricks merge up, once again. Both Ricks arrive at the group, reuniting with his wife Lori and son Carl. this is where we meet the rest of the group, including Rick's best friend, Shane Walsh. Later on, I'll dive deeper into the details of the Shane arc, as it's very important to the development of Rick's character. Back to the TV show, Rick returns to the group after trying to rescue Merle and get his guns back that he left on the streets of Atlanta. Upon returning, the group is being attacked by walkers, where many of the survivors perish. Jim is bitten, and this is where we see Rick's instinct is to help and not harm the living. In the comic, the group is just sitting around enjoying the campfire, talking about their previous lives when suddenly they are attacked by walkers. The group is forced to fight and then mourn those they've lost. It sort of just happens. But in the show, this becomes a driving point for Shane, who believes Rick should have been there. This starts to burn the fire that will ultimately become Shane's downfall. The show adds these layers to start a slow burn, but as I've mentioned before. It's in Season 1, Episode 5, Wildfire. Daryl Dixon attempts to execute Jim, who P.S. pretty much goes the same way as his comic book counterpart. Rick points his gun at Daryl and firmly says, "We don't kill the living." This line is absent from the early comics, since Daryl is a TV original character, but this underscores Rick's initial moral rule.
We don't kill the living.
It's almost quaint, given how much he'll change. At the start, Rick believes that survivors should stick together and retain civilized values. From a writing perspective, Rick is introduced as the audience's everyman anchor. He's a classic hero thrust into extraordinary circumstances. This allows viewers and readers to learn about the world through Rick's eyes. As he discovers the zombie apocalypse, so do we. The show uses cinematic quiet, long silent shots of Rick walking through corpse-littered Atlanta to emphasize his isolation and the world's horror, whereas the comic conveys this through stark, black and white artwork and minimal dialogue. In both, Rick's humanity shines in small moments, sparing a half-torso crawling walker out of pity or handing out hope to others. Little does he know his ethics will be tested brutally soon. So, I'm going to back up just a bit once more. After the group is attacked by the walkers at their camp, the first volume of the comic book is nearly over. This is where it differs quite a bit from each other. These two Ricks start to diverge. Like I said already, Shane in the TV show is furious at Rick, and he isn't afraid to let Rick know that he thought he should have been there and not out looking for Merle. But see, in both mediums, Shane is a foil to Rick, more aggressive, increasingly unstable, and secretly in love with Lori. Oh, how much we love TV show Lori. Tensions simmer between Rick and Shane over leadership and Lori's affections. This conflict is the first real test of Rick's principles, but for the TV show, we will have to wait until Season 2 to conclude the Shane arc. For the comics, the Shane saga is much more brief, as it concludes in issue number 6 or the end of volume 1. Just a few pages after the group is attacked, Shane's jealousy and anger explode. Shane holds Rick at gunpoint, blaming him for everything. It's Rick's fault that he has no friends, no family, no respect, no fucking life. Everything was perfect until Rick came back as he wasn't supposed to live. It was at this moment that a young Carl shoots Shane to save his father's life. Shane dies as Rick and Carl hold each other. This right here in the comic shows us how the world of The Walking Dead will shatter moral norms. For Rick, it's a traumatic loss, despite Shane's betrayal. After all, he was Rick's closest friend, his best friend. In fact, Rick in the comics is so haunted by his friend's death that later he returns to Shane's grave to put him down after he reanimates, a sign of Rick's lingering conflict between duty and sentiment. For the comic, this marks the end of the Shane arc, but for the TV show, we are just getting started. Continuing on with the TV show, the group travels to the CDC where they meet Dr. Jenner and discover more about this new world they're living in. This part wasn't in the comics, so I'll be skipping over this. Although I would like to point out that here's where we really see Rick start to lead the group and would do anything to protect them. The following season, Season 2, includes a few major arcs that weren't present in the comic books, but really start to shape out the character of Rick Grimes. Season 2 relentlessly tests Rick's leadership and ethics. He faces Sophia's tragic fate as well as him taking responsibility to put her down when she is discovered in the barn. He deals with the Randall dilemma, debating whether or not to execute a dangerous captive, which he ultimately decides to spare until Shane kills him anyways, which leads to Rick and his final clash with Shane, which is similar but very different than that of the comic books. On the TV show, Shane's arc is drawn out over 2 full seasons, giving their rivalry a slow, tension-filled burn. Through Season 1 and Season 2, Shane grows more volatile. He challenges Rick's leadership at every turn, especially as Lori's pregnancy reveals she had a relationship with Shane when she thought Rick was dead. The breaking point comes in Season 2, Episode 12, where Shane lures Rick out alone, intending to murder him. This is just after he killed Randall, and in an emotional confrontation under the moonlight, Rick pleads with Shane but ultimately stabs him in the heart, preempting Shane's attack. It's a heartbreaking moment. Rick is forced to kill his best friend, this time by his own hand, unlike the comics. Him having to do it himself in the TV show really begins to change and sculpt TV Rick. Immediately afterward, Carl arrives and shoots the reanimated Shane. To me, this is a notable and massive change from the comic books. Rick now being the one to put down his best friend changes the story completely, from a writing standpoint, that is. At this point in the show, it wasn't the first person he had killed to protect his group, but it was the first time we really see how far he would go to do so. Rick would even later tell his group that he killed his best friend for them.
I killed my best friend for you people, for Christ's sake!
By the end of Season 2, Rick's worldview has darkened. Shane's death is a massive turning point for Rick. He gives his famous speech to the stunned survivors. This is not a democracy anymore.
No one is going anywhere.
Do something.
I am doing something. I'm keeping this group together, alive. I've been doing that all along, no matter what. I didn't ask for this. This isn't a democracy anymore.
With those words, the kind, consensus-building Rick of early days is seemingly gone. He declares himself the authority for the group's survival. The show uses this speech to signal Rick's character shift, the reluctant hero who becomes a hardened leader, the Rick-tatorship, as fans call it. In the comics, the equivalent timeline, roughly issues number 7, 12, also has the group briefly at Herschel's farm. Carl is still shot and Herschel is needed to fix him. However, the farm's storyline in print is much shorter, and with different details. For one, Shane is already gone, so that interpersonal drama isn't dragging on. Instead, Comic Rick's challenges are more about learning limits. Herschel's barn of walkers, which leads to a massacre of Herschel's family, and Herschel expelling Rick's group, and then moving on to discover the abandoned prison, which they reach by issue number 12. The comic portrays Rick becoming the group's leader by necessity. After Shane's death, he naturally steps into the role. There's a key comic moment around issue number 11 where Rick and Herschel argue about keeping walkers in the barn, resulting in tragedy. Rick's takeaway is that no place is truly safe and tough calls are needed. Either way, Shane's demise is the crucible that hardens Rick's resolve in both mediums. The man who once said, "We don't kill the living," is now someone who has killed the living, and will do so again to protect those he loves. By the time both versions enter the prison arc, Rick's optimism is fading. The writers have effectively stripped him down through Season 2. He has lost close friends, seen the fragility of life, and realized he must change to protect his family. With Season 3, The Walking Dead enters one of its most acclaimed storylines, the prison versus Woodbury arc. Rick's group finds a prison in the Season 3 premiere, Seed, and clears it to make a new secure home. For the first time, Rick has a base to protect, and people looking to him as the unquestioned leader. But this relative haven quickly brings new trials. Other survivors, prison inmates, test Rick's rule, and the greatest external threat so far looms, the governor, the tyrannical leader of Woodbury.
Yeah, I mean, I hear rumors about this dude called the Governor. I mean, what a ridiculous name. I just can't wait to kick his ass.
In the comics, the prison arc spans roughly issues number 13 to 48, and it's absolutely brutal for Rick. Early on, at the end of issue 13, Rick's group meets the surviving inmates similar to the TV show when the inmates are found in the cafeteria. Eventually, one inmate turns murderous, and Rick doesn't hesitate to execute him, even shocking some of his own people. We see comic Rick's leadership hardening. He's willing to deliver vigilante justice for safety, the governor. In issues 27 to 29, Rick, Glenn, and Michonne are taken captive in Woodbury. The governor is sadistic, and in a moment that still makes comic readers wince, he cuts off Rick's right hand with a knife. That's right. Rick permanently loses his hand in the comics, a trauma the TV show notably did not inflict on its Rick. TV Rick was lucky enough to keep both of his hands, likely due to practical filming concerns, although the show did sneak in nods. For instance, Merle Dixon's severed hand in Season 1, or Rick injuring his hand multiple times as a tease. Eventually, we did get to see Rick lose his hand in The Ones Who Live, but that will be for part 2 of this video. The hand loss in the comic is symbolic as it physically handicaps Rick, forcing him to adapt, and it's a grim price paid in his first encounter with the governor, a sign that this villain is unlike any villain he has seen before. Meanwhile, back at the prison in the comics, tensions escalate. Rick's wife Lori is pregnant and nearing term, which weighs on him. He wrestles with the guilt and rage from the Woodbury torture. Eventually, in issue 39 and 40, Laurie gives birth to baby Judith, and for a brief moment, Rick experiences pure joy, but it's short-lived. On TV in Season 3, the storyline is remixed but parallel. Rick's group secures the prison, and for a time things look hopeful, until a catastrophic walker breach leads to the death of several, including Laurie. This is one of the most emotional moments in the series. In Episode 4, Killer Within, Laurie goes into labor during a walker attack, and with no doctor available, she sacrifices herself, having Maggie perform an impromptu C-section to save the baby, but Laurie dies in the process. Carl then has to put down his own mother to prevent reanimation. The show diverged massively from the comics here. In print, Laurie survives childbirth, but on TV, Laurie's death happens earlier and becomes a cornerstone of Rick's development. He hallucinates phone calls from her and other dead survivors, showcasing a man on the edge of sanity. This subplot was actually lifted from the comics. In both mediums, it's a haunting depiction of Rick's trauma. For the writer in us, it's a great use of an internal conflict device, visualizing Rick's guilt and despair through imagined conversations, a technique that works in print as inner monologue and on TV via hallucination. As Season 3 progresses, Rick recovers his resolve because he must protect everyone from the governor. The season ends with Rick welcoming the surviving Woodbury citizens to join his group at the prison, a significant softening of Rick, showing he hasn't lost all humanity. He even steps down from sole leadership, forming a council in Season 4's start, as he fears the dictator he was becoming. The show therefore portrays Rick's constant balancing act, oscillating between ruthless and merciful, as circumstances demand. I should also quickly mention Andrea's death in the TV show, as it is significantly different than the comics. In the comics, Andrea stays alive for much longer, and even marries Rick. I will talk about this later, but for now this part is a massive change of direction from the comics that will eventually influence Rick's development. In contrast, the comics' prison arc barrels toward utter tragedy. The governor returns with a vengeance in issue number 46 to 48, leading an all-out assault on the prison. This mirrors the mid-season finale of Season 4 of the show. This is where comic Rick truly loses almost everything. During the chaotic final battle, Laurie and baby Judith are gunned down while fleeing, an incredibly dark and gut-wrenching moment. Laurie's and Judith's deaths in the comic leave Rick and Carl utterly devastated, escaping the prison as its last survivors. Now notice how the TV and comic narratives diverged in pacing and outcomes. Laurie's death and Judith's fate happen at different times and in different ways, altering Rick's trajectory. Laurie's death in the show devastates him, an emotional collapse that results in phone call hallucinations. In the comic, he loses both Laurie and Judith at once, adding an unbearable layer of grief. In both, Rick emerges into the next arc with his family life shattered. In the show, he's lost Laurie, but clings to Carl and Judith. In the comic, he has only Carl left. The writing choices here drastically affect Rick's demeanor. TV Rick of Season 4 still has the newborn hope of Judith to live for, tempering his brutality, whereas comic Rick post-prison is a man who's truly lost everything except his son, making him even more hardened. From a writer's POV, the governor arc serves as a mirror. Rick is pitted against a dark reflection of what he could become if he lost his morality entirely. Both the comic and show play with this idea. For instance, in the show's Season 3 finale, when Rick sees the brutality the governor unleashed by killing his own people, Rick pointedly rejects that path. He opens the prison to survivors and takes down the Ricktatorship sign. It's a moment of character choice, Rick deciding not to become the governor. The comic, through its brutal events, forces Rick to confront similar questions, but in a more internal way later. The first half of Season 4 on TV depicts a relatively domestic Rick. Months have passed. He's put aside his gun to farm and raise pigs, trying to model a peaceful life for Carl. It's a deliberate slowdown from the constant conflicts, a lull that serves to show Rick attempting to regain his humanity. One of those quiet character beats the show does, using silence and routine to contrast the chaos. But of course, peace doesn't last. There's an influenza outbreak inside the prison, and the reemergence of the governor lead to catastrophe. In the mid-season finale, the governor attacks with a tank. The battle that ensues is a loose adaptation of the prison assault from the comics, though with different casualties. The prison is overrun by walkers and abandoned. Importantly, baby Judith is only thought dead for a while. Viewers were left uncertain as Rick and Carl only find an empty, blood-stained car seat, which adds Rick's despair. In Episode 9, After, Rick, injured and emotionally wrecked, tells Carl to run as he believes he's dying and about to turn. Carl breaks down at the thought of losing his dad. This episode, with Rick and Carl alone, closely parallels comic issue number 49, where in the aftermath of prison's fall, Rick and Carl roam alone, and Carl fears Rick might die, and Rick, in both versions, realizes more than ever how much Carl means to him. This father-son focus is crucial. Rick's relationship with Carl is the emotional heart of his story. Through all the horror, Rick's primary drive is protecting his child and building a world where Carl and Judith can have a life. As writers, we note this as Rick's core motivation. It's what keeps him from sliding into complete ruthlessness. Time and again, Carl, and later Judith, pull Rick back from the brink. We see it right here. In the show's post-prison episodes, Rick, despite being broken physically and mentally, pushes on because Carl needs him. Following the prison's fall, Season 4's second half has a scattered group trudging toward a hopeful sanctuary called Terminus. The Terminus storylines isn't fully present in the comics, but instead, it's a similar arc involving cannibals. Despite this, both Ricks have one of their most ferocious moments yet, the Claimers scene in episode 16. This is where those road bandits, the Claimers, ambush Rick, Carl, and Michonne. When one thug tries to assault Carl, Rick snaps into berserker mode. He bites out the leader Joe's throat with his teeth and savagely eviscerates the man threatening Carl. It's an incredibly visceral scene, adapted straight from comic issue 57, where Rick does exactly that to protect Carl. The show doesn't shy away. We see Rick covered in blood, panting like a wild animal, having literally torn a man apart with his bare hands. It's horrifying, yet we the audience are on Rick's side, because the situation was so dire. This is a standout example of the storytelling technique of escalation. By presenting an evil, such as men preying on a child so monstrous, the narrative justifies Rick crossing a line into primal violence. As Kirkman himself noted, Rick essentially becomes a living zombie in order to save him. Rick becomes what he fears to protect what he loves. It's both symbolic and literal foreshadowing of the idea that in this world, the living can be more savage than the dead. The use of silence and sudden gore in the show at that moment, no heroic music, just raw sound, forces viewers to sit with the shock of what Rick did. In the comic, the aftermath panel shows Rick stunned at himself, yet resolute that he'd do it again for Carl. This is a key turning point, where Rick fully accepts that there are no limits to what he'll do for his family. As a writer, one can see this as the climax of Rick's transformation into a protector at any cost. It's terrifying, but also solidifies Rick's position as the group's uncompromising guardian figure. Shortly after, Rick's group falls into the trap of Terminus, which leads into Season 5. In the comic book's post-prison arc, Rick and Carl eventually reunite with some of the scattered group, such as Michonne, then Glenn and Maggie, and eventually meet Abraham Ford's small group. On the road, they encounter the Hunters, a cannibalistic group that preys on survivors. This is the comic version of the Terminus cannibal storyline. These two similar but different versions of Rick are once again closely merged and almost on the same path. Both Ricks will do anything to protect his family at any cost. And this doesn't just mean Carl or Judith. This is for anyone who is part his group. They are his family now, and we will have to see just how much further he is willing to go. This is where I will be concluding part 1 of this in-depth breakdown of these two versions of Rick Grimes. The next part will detail Rick Grimes through the next few seasons of the TV show, specifically seasons 5 to 9 and from the TV show The Ones Who Live, and its key differences between the comics at a similar point in time. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please like the video, and be sure to subscribe to see the in-depth breakdown in part 2.